Most writers think a psychological thriller begins with an event, a body, a letter, a disappearance, a threat. But the truth is, the real beginning happens long before page 1. It happens inside the character, in the place they refuse to look. Because in psychological thriller, the plot doesn't chase you protagonist. The plot presses on their wound until the truth starts leaking out. And if you don't build that wound on purpose, you'll end up with a story that feels like a thriller on the surface, but has no psychological grip, no obsession, no dread that sticks. So today we are going to design the most important engine in your entire book. Not a quirk, not they are anxious sometimes, not they have a tragic backstory. A wound is a hidden damage that changes how they interpret reality and forces them to make choices that keep the thriller alive. This isn't theory. This is the same character work I use in my own novels, the same approach I am using right now on my new book Madison, where the horror isn't just what happens to her, it is what her mind has to become in order to survive it. By the end of this episode, you will have a method to build a protagonist wound that powers an entire psychological thriller, a flawed character model you can write from immediately, and a villain blueprint that makes the conflict personal, intelligent, and terrifying. And yes, there is homework as we did on episode 1, because if you don't write it down, it is not a character, it is a vibe. Let's define it properly. Your protagonist's wound is the psychological injury that shapes how they survive the world. It creates a lie they believe, a coping strategy they use to stay functional, and a secret they protect, often from themselves. Here is the mistake. People confuse the wound with the event. The wound is my character's dad left. No, that's an event. The wound is what the event did to their nervous system. What it taught them about safety, love, identity, and control. A wound is a belief that becomes a prison. For example, if I am not useful, I'll be abandoned. If I tell the truth, I'll destroy everyone. If I trust my own memory, I'll become the monster. If I let anyone close, they'll see what I really am. That's the psychological raw material thrillers feed on. Because once you have a wound like that, you don't need to invent tension. Tension appears naturally whenever the story forces the protagonist toward the truth. This is the most useful character tool I can give you. The wound triangle. Wound, the damage, what hurt them. The lie, the belief, what they concluded to survive. And the mask, the coping mechanism, how they present themselves so nobody sees the wound. Let's build one very quickly. The wound. As a child, they were blamed for something they didn't fully understand. Next is the lie. I ruin people. I am dangerous. And then comes the mask. They become controlled, polite, hyper-responsible. They manage every room, They never lose their temper. Now, you can already feel a thrill in that, because the villain doesn't have to break into the house. They just have to whisper, "You did it again." And the protagonist will unreveal from the inside. This is why the wound matters. Because psychological thrillers are not driven by what the character wants. They are driven by what the character is terrified to become. Your protagonist needs a secret. And in psychological thrillers, the best secrets have one key feature. They are identity threatening. Not "I cheated on my exam." Not "I stole money once." Those can be secrets, but they don't usually power a full book. A thriller secret should make the protagonist think, "If that is the truth, I am not who I thought I was." There are 3 types of protagonist secrets that work brilliantly. Number 1 would be the secret they already know. They did something. They witnessed something. They covered something up. They are not forgetting it. They are protecting it. This is number 2, the secret key half known. They remember fragments, images, sensations, but the meaning is missing, and their mind won't let them assemble it. This creates dread because the protagonist is chasing their own shadow. The number 3, the secret they don't know yet. This is the classic psychological thriller move. The truth is buried, so deep they can't access it without breaking. Not because they are stupid, because the mind is a survival machine. It will sacrifice memory to keep you functional. Now, here's the most important rule. The secret must connect to the wound. If it's random, the ending feels like a trick. If it is connected, the ending feels inevitable. A flawed character is not a bad person. A flawed character is a person with a predictable failure pattern under stress. In psychological thrillers, flaws are gold because they create mistakes, misinterpretations, and decisions that trap the protagonist deeper. So here's the formula. Flaw plus pressure equals wrong choice. That wrong choice creates the next problem. The next problem creates more pressure. The spiral tightens. Now, the flaw must be connected to the wound, always. Examples that work well in psychological thrillers. Control. They try to manage everything, so they can't accept uncertainty. People pleasing. They avoid conflict, so they fail to set boundaries until it is too late. Obsession. They fixate on solving one thing, even as their life collapses around them. Avoidance. They refuse to confront the truth, which forces the truth to become monstrous. And the moral pride. They need to believe they are good, so they rewrite reality to protect that identity. Now, let me give you a quick test. If your protagonist is flawed, you should be able to answer this in one sentence. When they are scared, they always denies, lies, runs, controls, blames themselves, blames someone else. That is your engine, and it will write a scenes for you. Now let's talk about the villain, Because a psychological thriller villain is not a monster in the dark. They are a person or system who understands the protagonist's wound and uses it. Here's the blueprint. The villain's job: identify the wound, exploit the coping mask, force exposure of the secret, offer a false safety that costs identity. A great villain doesn't just threaten the protagonist's life, they threaten the protagonist's story about themselves. Now, there are three villain types for psychological thrillers. The intimate villain: a spouse, a parent, a best friend, a therapist, someone with access. They don't need evidence, they don't need brute force. They can't rewrite reality using familiarity. Then we have the institutional villain: a hospital, a school, a court, a social worker, a police department. The villain is a procedure. This is terrifying because the protagonist can't fight without looking irrational. And then type 3, the internal villain: addiction, compulsion, dissociation, paranoia, memory distortion. The protagonist becomes their own adversary. Now, here's the crucial villain rule. A villain must have a rational belief, not "I am evil" or not "I like hurting people," but a belief that sounds clean in their head. Let me give you some examples. I am protecting them from themselves. They are unstable, and if I am the only one who can manage them. Truth is dangerous. I'm keeping the family safe. If they remember, I will destroy everything. They owe me for what they did. Your villain should feel like a person who thinks they are doing the right thing, and that makes them scarier than a cartoon psychopath. Let's do a fast build, the same way you did episode 1, but now we add character depth. Step 1. Choose a wound event. As a child, the protagonist was blamed for a sibling's accident. Now step 2, convert it into a wound belief. A lie: I ruin people, I can't trust myself. Next, step 3, choose the coping mask. They become hyper-responsible, polished, controlled. On step 4, choose the flaw under pressure. When scared, they always over-control and deny uncertainty. And of course, step 5, create a villain who knows where to cut. An intimate villain, a therapist, a step-parent, a partner, someone who uses concern as a weapon. They say, I am worried about you, you have been here before, you told me about the accident. And the protagonist freezes because they don't remember telling anyone. Now watch what we have created. The villain attacks identity, not safety. The protagonist's flaw creates wrong choices. The wound produces doubt. The secret becomes inevitable. That is psychological thriller engine. And now the premise from episode 1 becomes charged with character. So here is your homework, my friends. This is where your book starts becoming real. So this is homework A, the wound triangle. If you could write wound damage, 1 sentence. The lie, the belief, 1 sentence. The mask, the coping mechanism, 1 sentence. Then the homework B, the pressure flaw. Finish this sentence. When my protagonist is scared, they always... What will be next? Okay, homework C, the villain blueprint. If you could write villains believe I am doing this because, what would be? The villain's method, I control them by what that would be. Villains leverage. I know they won't because. Post your wound triangle in the comments or keep it private if it is personal. And subscribe because episode 03 is where we build antagonist pressure system and start designing escalation that tightens like a trap. Please like, comment and subscribe, and if you could hit that bell will be even greater. In episode 03 we are going to stop you villain from doing evil things and make them start engineering your protagonist's collapse. See you then.